So welcome back, everybody, to our brunches. We do these whenever we feel like it. And we find interesting topics, interesting people to talk to, roughly around diabetes, but not always. But today we're going to be talking about obesity. And we have with us a special guest, Stephanie DeGiorgio, and Dr. Stephanie DeGiorgio and Dr. Patrick Holmes. But before we get in that, because Facebook, it takes time for people to join. We like to do a little bit of an icebreaker. This time, I think Beth was going to kind of explain this one.
Wow. I have like some lovely peonies next to me. Oh, you can't really see them very well. So I was going to say what everyone's favourite flower is. Mine would be a peony, I think.
Oh, is there a reason behind the peony?
Oh, I don't know. They're very expensive, so they're a treat. I see them in the shops. They're like £6 for a bunch of them. No, I don't know. I just like they're very pretty when they open up, and they smell very nice. Yeah, that's mine. So,
I like daffodils, and I think that's because it means it's going to be summer soon. It's in the middle of the winter and the daffodils start to come up and you're like, there's an end to this winter cold because there's flowers. So it must be spring, even though it's like February. But yeah. Tamsin, what about you? What's your favorite?
Mine isn't really a flower, it's a bush that I have in the garden, and it's called Salvia hot lips. It smells amazing, and it has white and red flowers on it.
Do they look like hot lips?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
That's very new.
So yeah.
Steph, what about you?
I'm a peony girl like you. I just love them for all their fluffy decadentness of loveliness. Yeah, so they're my go-to for when I need cheering up. They're brilliant. And they have a really short season, so they're kind of special because you can only get them for a short amount of time. I think that's my favorite.
Cool. I'm quite interested to see what Patrick's going to come up with for this one.
I was originally going to say self-raising, but then but no, it was actually I'm a bit like you, Amanda. For me, crocuses. So I do suffer from a bit of a seasonal affective disorder, so I'm miserable as hell. But the crocuses, when they start popping up, I know the world's going to start waking up, and I'm going to be happier again. So yeah, crocuses.
Yeah. Cool. Right. I think we've got a few people joined on the live stream now. If you haven't managed to catch it live, we always record it and we always put it on our YouTube channel and our podcast. We'll take the audio and put it on our podcast, and it's also on Facebook on our open page if you want to catch up there as well. So loads of ways to view this, but the best way is live, because you can ask the questions direct to the speakers. So that's what we want. We want lots and lots of questions because there's only so many questions me and Beth and Tamsin can think of. So we need lots of questions from you guys. Okay. But we'll start off by just talking about you, Steph, your interests, your day job. Just tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay. So I am a GP by training. I did obs and gynae first and then became a GP. At the moment, my day job is working in urgent treatment centre in Margate Hospital, which I swore I'd never go back to 15 years ago, but I'm back now. And I love it, actually. I really love it. I've been a GP partner. I've done general practice for a long time and then got recruited to come and run this service, which I now don't run anymore because then I got long COVID, which is really fun. So I'm 3 years into that and feeling a bit crummy. I teach a lot as well. So I work for a company that does GP education. So I do their women's health course and their obesity course. And I've written the obesity guideline for the Royal College of GPs as well. So, and actually I'm happy to talk about this. I developed quite significant obesity after my second child. I'd always kind of been predisposed to it, but it kind of took hold. So 7 years ago, I had a gastric sleeve done. at the same time as I needed my gallbladder out, so I sort of got a 2 for 1.
Buy one, get one free.
Yeah, buy one, get one free. I don't recommend it, and the surgeon said he didn't recommend it either because it was all a bit stressful. But it has definitely been the best thing I ever did for me. Much healthier, life has been better, and made me very, very keen to learn more, talk more, and share it, I think, because sometimes having someone who can kind of make things accessible to people living with obesity, the general public, and also professionals can be quite helpful. And I'm a mad cat lady. I've got 5 of them. I've got 2 children who are, well, one's not a child, she's 18, and can be my driver now, so I can have a little drink when we go out. And an 11-year-old who is at home with me as well, and a husband who is a GP partner as well. So that's kind of me in a nutshell, really.
Oh, very interesting. It's really nice that you've got that kind of background. So you're not talking at it from books, you've got lived experience of this. And I think that does make a big difference when talking about things like this. I think that's probably why I talk about diabetes a lot, type 1. My son has type 1. And I think when you have that lived experience, you've just got so much more of an insight to it. So Patrick, let's talk about you. Where are you from? Like, we don't know you.
Everyone knows.
So, well, no, but not everybody will know. So I'm originally from Leeds, and trained in London. I always wanted to be a GP. So so I always wanted to be a GP. So it was very disappointing when you go to your medical school interview and you say, what do you want to be when you grow up? So I want to be a GP. And they look at you very disappointed. So, but always wanted to be a GP. And anyway, I ended up, I'm a GP partner. I have been now for 24 years in Darlington in the northeast of England. I suddenly worked out loads of my patients were developing this condition called diabetes early on in my career. And I thought, well, I best get to know a bit about this. It seems to be going up quite a bit. I mean, we've certainly since that time, of course, we've seen the doubling of rates. And then over time, in terms of interest, when it comes to obesity, of course, 90% of patients with type 2 diabetes, it's a complication of their obesity. So, and northeast of England is the heaviest actually in England. So we've got highest rates of obesity, and we see there's quite a deprived area. So it was just something which my patients were having. And then once you start treating diabetes the right way, you suddenly discover actually you're really just treating obesity, a lot of it, as early as possible, and then all these other conditions seem to get better as well. So so that's sort of my journey into obesity. But I'm still very much I'm a northeast North Cumbria diabetes lead for the whatever it is, the clinical network. So that's what I do, and sort of nerdishly do other things, and interested in data and studies and how information gets accumulated, mainly because I get frustrated with what the current treatments are. I always want what's over the horizon, and I want to be there first, so my patients benefit from it first. But so
I think you were one of the first people to use some of the was it semaglutide, or was it?
Yeah, we've done some. So we've done. I was involved in some studies, some real world studies I led, and that. So I got published in those things, and been using. Well, I mean, way before that. I mean, Steph will know we've had incretins for a very long time. Back to the likes of Byetta. So I've been using these agents now for about 12 years, but certainly, the more newer generations, ones you mentioned, semaglutide, are also very good at treating obesity. And of course, and it's the gift that's been giving is the link. I mean, what Steph was saying about bariatric surgery or metabolic surgery. This is where we've learned so much about these gut hormones, and we're going to. And really, it's taking a bit longer for these products to come available, to treat. But increasingly, they're now becoming maybe we'll come on to supply issues at some point.
Yeah.
But
let's start from the beginning.
We have supply, they also can be quite useful agents and give choice to people who want a pill or an injection rather than surgery. But yeah.
Brilliant. So let's start from the beginning. Diagnostic criteria. So how do you kind of diagnose somebody with obesity, Steph? Do you want to kind of explain differences in diagnosis?
Yeah, I think one of the really important things, if I can go back even one step further, is to know what obesity is. And obesity is so much more than just our relationship with gravity, which is our weight. And obesity is having an excessive amount of fat tissue on your body that causes bad things to happen, that causes disease and inflammation. And what's really important, excuse me, is where that fat tissue is predominantly. So you can have 3 people with a BMI of 29, and if someone carries their weight centrally, so around their tummy, that fat is around their organs, their visceral organs, and that fat is not an inert yellow globule. It is a very metabolically active piece of tissue that secretes lots and lots of bad things that can cause, that's the insulin resistance. It causes inflammation in the endothelium, in the blood vessels. So when we're thinking about saying, right, someone has the disease of obesity, because we now know that it really is a condition that people are predisposed to. It's not laziness, it's not gluttony, it's not, greediness. If we're going to sort of say, right, we think someone's got it, the first thing I say to people is look at the person in front of you, because what shape that person is going to very much determine the risk from their obesity, from that excess fat tissue that person has. So if someone holds all their weight around their middle but has slim legs, then that person is at much higher risk because they have all the fat around the middle, compared to someone like me who's much more bottom heavy but still has a smaller waist, because that subcutaneous fat tissue isn't as active. It still does some stuff, but it doesn't cause as much harm as the visceral fat, which is the very dangerous fat. So first, look at the person. And then the new NICE guidelines for obesity were updated last year. It hasn't been rewritten. It was just like an update to the previous guidance, which was an update to the previous one, which was an update to the previous one. So we're still waiting for a proper redo of it. But we need to do 2 things really now. We need to calculate someone's BMI. But to do that, we need to make sure we're using the right BMI charts. So when you look at the NICE guidance, or I think even better, the new Irish Association for Obesity guidance, or a Canadian Obesity Society, on there are BMI charts for different ethnic backgrounds. And that really matters because some people from different ethnic backgrounds carry their weight centrally more predominantly than others. And so they are at risk from that visceral fat at a lower BMI. So we need to make sure that we do the BMI and we use those correct charts. Then we're also supposed to use waist circumference, because that's a sort of a proxy measure for the amount of fat around someone's middle. And ideally, you want your abdominal circumference to be less than half your height. That's kind of what the guidance says. Because, and it is only a proxy measure, because
we're all going to get tape measures out after this.
Yeah, no, I don't recommend it. It's people get abdominal bloating. There's lots of other things. So we need to be sensible about this. But if we do those 2 things together and look at our patient and what shape they are, then that helps us to diagnose obesity properly. And the other thing, very quickly, because I know I'm talking a lot, we need to make sure we use the correct terminology. So the WHO has the right terminology, and all those guidelines I've just mentioned. So it's obesity, then class 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And so we don't use terms like morbid obesity or grossly obese or any of those anymore. They're outdated, they're not nice, they're stigmatizing. So we need to make sure we put all the right stuff in there. So that's kind of how I would diagnose it. And then you need to look a little bit further to say, okay, what health problems is that this person's obesity causing them? So that's a sort of an outline.
Yeah. So Patrick, in GP land, can you put that levels of obesity on the systems? Can you code it like that? Because we still see morbid obesity. We still see, when I see patients in hospital and you look at their GP records, you'll still see obesity, and it won't say anything. It'll just say obesity.
No, I mean you raise a really important point, and I think the truth is our clinical system just got all these old codes as well as the new codes. So if we think about diabetes, there's all this sort of insulin dependent diabetic.
Yeah.
You know, those things will be on there, which of course terms we haven't used for years. But yeah, and of course, patients now have full access to their records. So we need to be very careful about what we put on their records, because either in a letter or as a code on their clinical system, because that might be you're writing, it's their record. It's not my record, it's their record. And just have to think about how you'd want it to be described. So I think and we need to explain what we're putting on people's records. But yeah, all these old codes are there. Of course, some of those will be historically put on there. I mean, we generally just use the term obesity, but even that can, even the word obesity is requires a conversation often before it goes on, because people, often people see the word obese as something very other. It's people really with, very high BMIs. Whereas, the average BMI in the UK is about 28 now. So, it's and going up. So actually obesity is a really common condition if we're just using the BMI criteria. And as Steph has actually pointed out, it's a bit more complicated than just going with a weight, because we're missing a big trick on that, because some people are more vulnerable than others to this, just as some people are more vulnerable to other conditions, heart disease or, COPD than others. The same is true with, obesity and how and where the weight. And again, a lot of this is all determined by the genes we're born with, a lot of it anyway.
So you talked about, there's quite an important point, you talked about like the stigma attached to it and making sure we're using the right terminology. And a little shout out to one of our really close friends who sadly died, Fenella, and she was a big kind of advocate for the language or obesity language matters. So we've got a similar document for diabetes, and in the same way they then did, is it the European Association for, begins with E, doesn't it? Yeah. They did the kind of obesity language matters, which when it came out, I don't know if it's been as profound as it was in diet, but it might just be because obviously we work in diabetes, so we absorbed the language matters there. But it was about using the correct terminology and the language that we use people, and how detrimental that stigma is that we use. So if people haven't seen that, we can put the link in the chat, can't we, to that? But we would recommend. Has that been something that's gone out to primary care, secondary care, and as much as the diabetes one, do you think, Steph? Or
no.
Yeah, because we still see so much stigma.
And I think, and the reason is the stigma. So there are still people who believe that you can shame people into losing weight, whereas the opposite is true. The more shame and stigma someone feels, the more likely they are to gain weight because of this horrible negative inner weight bias that they have. And so I think there are some people who will argue till their dying day that calling someone obese is good for them because they should know about it and it will make them try harder. And so I'm not sure that message got out as well as it should, but it's getting out. I mean, I've taught 3,000 GPs about obesity in the last year, and that's the first bit of what I talk about. And what I always say to people is, you wouldn't say you had a cancerous patient. I mean, it just makes you feel a bit sick, doesn't it? It makes you do a mini sick in your mouth. And yet people think that saying you have an obese patient is okay. So using that language, and I think sometimes people think I'm being quite pernickety or petty when I bring it up, because I actually always correct people everywhere. Whether it's my mum or my sister who I drive mad, or a person on Twitter or a colleague in the hospital, I always correct them because it matters. And I don't think people realize how much it matters. And I hear stories still of what's said to people with obesity in healthcare. And so it's getting out there, and I've seen other people correct people, and I'm like, yes, this is amazing. And you do it kindly, you do it nicely, but you do it because these things really matter.
Yeah, and I think when we're expecting people, we are healthcare professionals, we're supposed to be caring and giving help. If you expect people to come to you for help, you need to have that kind of non-judgmental. And I do the same, I call people out all the time and it does get me into trouble. But I still carry on doing it because it is important and it does matter. Like one of your patients might see you doing that and then,
Yep.
you know, feel happy to come to you for help. So yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
So I think, Patrick, you alluded to kind of maybe things that might make people more susceptible to having obesity. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, well, I mentioned the genes that we have. There's huge amounts of research, and actually, one thing UK is pretty good at some of the research in the genes. As a Professor Sir Professor Stephen O'Reilly, or his name anyway, so who in Oxford, who's done huge amounts of research on this, seen as a world leader in it, and I think. And obviously, there's a huge amount of overlap between some of those genes for obesity and type 2 diabetes. You know, and these are, some are about energy expenditure, some of them are about appetite. You know, some of the, you know, things which, and again, it's this. You know, I would agree with. I can't agree any more really with Steph. We should be living in a tolerant society where we accept people for who they are. And it doesn't matter what color they are or where they're from, but we've still got these sorts of bigoted views, maybe not less so on the color of the skin, hopefully, but we've still got them about other differences which are perhaps a bit more invisible, at least initially. But yeah, it's the genes there, and of course, I suppose that if you know why are we as a nation getting bigger? I always talk about those sorts of pictures we've often seen in of, I don't know, Brighton Beach in the 1970s. I'm old enough to have possibly been on a Brighton Beach in the 1970s, except I was in north of England, so I went to Bridlington instead. But they were all stick thin. But the environment that we live in, you know, it makes it really difficult. Some of the cheapest foods are often not the healthiest. The food industry has got a lot to answer for. Those people are meant to keep us safe. The governments have probably somehow allowed this to happen as well. So, and of course, we're not alone, but certainly in Europe, we probably have got the worst record, I would say. So we've, but yeah, so the environment we are in, plus the genes we've got, you know, remember our ancestors essentially survived, you know, ice ages, crop failure, you know, weather events. And so actually, if you had genes which were really good at laying down fat, then actually you're more likely to have survived those events and essentially pass those genes on. So we are a victim of the success of our ancestors, a lot of this. But anyway, but we've got the genes we've got, but they vary amongst us, but for some people it does make it more difficult, and that's just the genes. And then obviously there can be things that happen in people's lives, you know, mental health problems, childhood trauma, you know, some of the behaviors we learn. You know, my grandparents were always. I've got a secret craving for, it's not very secret in my family, but anyway, for Haribo. Christ, you know, you give me a packet of Haribo, it goes. I have to just walk past that aisle because I have no control when I buy the stuff. So, but it, you know, some of that was probably embedded in me by my grandparents, who every time I see my grandparents, they always used to have loads of treats and sweets for me, but probably not the best gift they gave me, really. There are better gifts they could have taken me for a walk or let me play with a dog or something. Maybe I'd have been a bit better. But yeah, so I suppose the environment and our families, which obviously bring us up. I don't know if I've missed anything else out there, Steph. There's probably more to add, I think.
I think one of the things that's quite interesting, because people always say, oh, well, our genetics haven't changed, so it's clearly not that, you know, and actually they have. And I think that generational change, so we know that if your mum has obesity, and interestingly, your dad has obesity at the time of conception, then you're more likely to have it. And then there are epigenetic changes that go transplacentally. So that visceral fat sends those signals through the placenta to the embryo and then makes that embryo more likely to develop obesity in later life. And it causes changes in the genes of that individual. So then that goes to the next generation and the next generation. And I think that's really important, because actually people say genes aren't changing. They are, they really do. And that is a huge part of it as well. And we know, it's between about 40 and 70% of this is genetic, and it affects our behaviors so inherently. And if anyone wants to know more about that, I highly recommend my colleague Giles Yeo's book on the genetics of body weight. He is an absolute awesome scientist and human being who has a very good way of discussing the genetics of body weight, why some people are naturally thin, why some people are naturally bigger, and why we're getting increasingly bigger as the generations go on. So highly recommend that as well.
Just going to check if they had it on Audible. Genetics. They don't. Damn. I love a good book on the way to work.
He did actually, Giles did a really good podcast. I don't know if you've read, everyone younger than me likes it. Stephen Bartlett, he calls himself that it's basically it's DOAC, DOAC is the name of his podcast, which makes me giggle for geeky medical reasons. Giles went on his podcast, and Stephen is very he's one of the dragons on Dragon's Den, and he's into lifting and being very fit and healthy, and is sponsored by Huel. Giles blew his mind with the stuff, because he was very much of the kind of, well, people should just try harder camp, and it was a fascinating podcast. So if you want to listen to that, Diary of a CEO, I think it's called, and it's Stephen Bartlett and Giles Yeo, and that's a really good listen as well. Really good, like proper good. So highly recommend that.
I mean, that's when you hear people saying, oh, they just need to eat less and move more, and you just need to do this, and you just need to, when you teach, what do you say about those kinds of things? Or like the direct trial we had in diabetes, you probably know, like, just do this, just eat soups and shakes for 10 weeks and you'll be the size of a mouse by the end of it. It does frustrate me quite a bit, but it got a huge press in diabetes land, I'm sure yours as well. But when you teach, what do you kind of say?
So the first thing I do is acknowledge that, yes, the whatever law of thermodynamics exists, right? If you put energy in, you will gain weight if you don't expend that energy. So physics, we're not denying physics, but we are adding in behaviors. We're adding in hormones. We're adding in altered physiology as a sort of disease process. And all of those things change our energy balance in a not good way. And so, and all of those things are not excuses. They are disease physiology and behaviors, trauma, the environment in which we live. And so I very much say, yes, okay, that's true. And everyone can lose weight. Everyone can lose weight. If you put someone on a dust diet, which is what I call soup and shakes, having done it twice and now can't even smell the crap. It just, people lose weight. I've done that. I've lost hundreds of stones, and then the problem is putting it back on again because of the altered physiology. And that's the bit that people forget, and they go, oh, well, everyone can lose weight, and then they go off their diet, and then they eat fish and chips all the time, and they put all their weight back on. That's not what happens. What happens is your body conspires against you, if you have this disease of obesity, to put that weight back on. And a friend described it as, if you go on one of those dust diets and you lose the weight, but you have established obesity, it's like pulling the ripcord on a life jacket when you stop the diet, because the weight piles back on. I'm not going to admit how much I regained in 3 months after that diet. And it wasn't because I was doing HIIT classes 4 times a week. I was doing yoga. I had a Peloton. I was doing all the activity. I was eating well, but the weight piled on. And so that's what I tell people is it's physiology and it's hormones and it's a disease process, which doesn't alter the physics, but it manipulates the physics. And that's why it's so much more than eat less and move more.
Yeah, they talk about that in a book I read. Well, I didn't read it. It was on Audible. I listened to it in the car. Why We Eat Too Much in Dr. Andrew Jenkins. And I think he talks about the basal metabolic rate kind of resetting after you do one of those diets. And then so you're here, and actually once you go into starvation mode, your metabolic rate then gets set here. So you've got no choice but to put it back on and more, because your body's fighting against you because it doesn't want you to go into that kind of starvation phase again. So it's a really interesting book to listen to if you want to. I have put the podcast that you talked about into the chat on Facebook. So if you want to have a look at that, and please do ask us some questions. There is
also on Amazon, there is, I don't know how many, I think 10 or something, from the same person, Dr. Giles Yeo, called Choose the Fat. And there's about 10 podcasts, and they're all about 30-40 minutes long. And he obviously talks about lots of different subjects. So if you're on Amazon, then you've got those free to listen to as well.
That's my next 10 commutes.
Well, it's good to have some recommendations, because the amount of information there is about just do this diet, just do that diet. And someone's asked, actually, what is the best diet? I know which, like, what we kind of say, but there's so many kind of diets and information. So we'll come to that. We can talk about now. There's a lot of kind of talk about tier services, tier 1 to 3. I don't know if Steph, you wanted to talk, or Patrick, which we can do a bit each. The different tiers, what they are, maybe who can go to one, and does everybody in the NHS have access to all of the tiers? Pretty sure the answer is no. But yeah, obviously I don't know who wants to start. Steph, do you want to start with?
Okay, so the tier system is, this is where I'd get myself in trouble because it's a bit rubbish. So tier 1 is your general public health, who has no budget anymore, advice on trying to stay healthy. So tier 1 isn't really a thing. Tier 2 is community-based activities generally, or services. They are commissioned by the health services and councils kind of at the same time. And they tend to be short 12-week-ish interventions. And very rarely, actually, unfortunately, are they ever look, and this might be interesting because I know Patrick's interested in the data, but I've never been able to find any good data that anyone has ever really assessed whether they do anything. But there'll be a 12-week walking group, or there'll be a 12-week access to a commercial slimming company. It'll be one of those kind of things, which is fine if you have 3 kilos to lose. Wicked, amazing. If you have a BMI of 60 and you have severely, you have established obesity, it might be great to get you active in a group of people who are nice and, but it's not going to fix your obesity. Then tier 3 is a multidisciplinary service set up with lots of different people in it, hopefully, but only 50% of the country have access to it. I don't know I don't think you have one up there, Patrick, or certainly if there is one, it's very limited.
We
do have some
in the Midlands.
Yeah, okay. So we do, but again, well, there's access and access. I think some people might say the waiting time makes it actually a huge obstacle as well.
It's about 2 years the wait down here at the moment, which is completely bonkers. And you have to have, basically, anyone who's ever referring anyone, please refer to the right service. So the form generally says, has this person tried to lose weight before through tier 2? Just tick it. If they've got obesity, they'll have done all those things before. Just tick the form and send them off to tier 3. Because what tier 3 is, they should be getting more help. And that is where, in theory, if you've got a commission service that works, you will have a physician who can prescribe semaglutide. In theory. In theory. But yeah, so 50% of the country can't even access that. And then you have tier 4, which is metabolic bariatric surgery, which you have to graduate from tier 3 before you can get to tier 4, because I mean, obese people really need to just try and prove their worth to get the evidence-based treatment that they need. And that's people, people admit that tier 3 is holding. So people will be in tier 3 for 3 or 4 years before they get through to tier 4. So
I mean,
it's bonkers.
Yeah,
Bonkers.
we don't even have a tier 3 service, and we've been trying to build one for it feels like 3 years. I'm pretty sure it's probably longer than that, to be fair. But we have a tier 4 service, and they just bounce straight from tier 2, I'm assuming, into tier 4.
Oh, okay.
So that's
without
probably good.
without any midpoints, which is not, no, yeah, I was going to say not necessarily a bad thing. But we just have no tier 3 weight management service at all.
No.
Yeah, I mean, in different areas it is different. I mean, in the whole northeast, so we've got one area, Sunderland, where they've always been quite active in terms of bariatric surgery. So they don't have tier 3 services, but they have tier 4 services. So but waiting times are enormous. And then we've got the rest of the patch. We sort of have tier 3 services, but they're really they are pre-bariatric services. So therefore, people who are wanting to go to a service and don't want to have surgery, and not everybody wants to have surgery. So then they get frustrated because they don't really get looked after in that service. They feel like they've basically done a bad smell in the room, and end up coming back to us. So it's a right. There is huge amounts of postcode lottery in as everything in the NHS, but and despite and actually talking about those services, I mean, of course, if you look at the NICE TA for semaglutide, not that we've got any high dose semaglutide in the country yet, but at some point we may do, they specifically talk about a multidisciplinary clinic, notwithstanding tier 3 or tier 4 services. So in other words, it doesn't have to, we shouldn't necessarily be, I think we need to be thinking beyond tiered services, but what we need is the services, which I think is probably the biggest challenge, whatever you call it. And the scale of need is massive, really. Even if we just look at that technology appraisal for high dose semaglutide, it's sort of Wegovy, when it does come, there's in England, I think it's 4.2 million people would be eligible for that. And the government had this announcement, all this big song and dance. Just at the same time, there was a supply problem emerging. But anyway, a big announcement about this pilot. I'm trying to do the maths myself. It was probably going to affect maybe 1,000, 1,500 people. It's a sticky plaster over a problem we need to really get to grips with. And I think that requires the political will. And I think it all goes back to the conversation Steph alluded to, which is all about stigma, because we've still got some work to do on the people who lead this country, I think, for them to take this quite seriously. I think they're a bit behind the curve of certainly the people on the call today.
I think
what are they doing? Oh, sorry.
Sorry, no. I was just going to say, so I've been involved. So I am part of a company called All About Obesity, which is a third sector education, and we advocate, and also so Giles is part of it too. And so interestingly, the Department of Health approached us to talk about this new pilot and things, and we're trying to kind of put some influence into that, because what we're hoping will happen, and in my head this is what I would love, would be if we could get community-based services, and they'd be, a hub is a term used for everything, but let's use that term anyway, a community hub, an obesity hub, where it might be GPs with a special interest, with the backup of an obesity physician, and they would run a sort of an obesity service in the community. And I think that's the only way we're ever going to get a service at scale. If you put this in secondary care, it's never going to happen. There just isn't the space or the time. And so I think that's what this pilot is hopefully going to be. And that would be an amazing, I think it's a good thing. I try not to talk about it in the kind of, oh my God, this is like literally a band-aid on a ruptured aorta scenario. So I try and think this is a good thing. And what it might enable us to do is set a good model. And that would be really nice. I'd like that. If we had any drugs.
People might as well be more inclined to see their GP, because you tend to know your GP, you've got a better relationship with your GP. You might feel better to go that route than being sent to a centre, because like ours is miles away. It's not even in our, they're usually what's the word, tendered out to some place
Yeah.
5 hours away, aren't they?
I mean, I think it might not be your GP, but it would be a GP.
Like a gypsy kind
And
of model.
and it would be someone, because there's a little army of us who are around who possibly aren't doing normal general practice anymore for various reasons.
Yeah, we want
and who might have that free time to do that, because GPs are overwhelmed. So I think there's scope for this to get better, and that's how I see it going forwards, really.
Yeah, I just want to come on to the questions on Facebook. So there's a few things here. People, well, it's more comments than everything. So somebody's asked about intermittent fasting, Mediterranean diet, but I think we've probably covered that a little bit about. Would that help? I think
I'll
it's
let
not
Patrick
really...
take the diet
well,
question.
Well, thanks, Steph. So I mean, we're all different, aren't we? And I think, first of all, any diet needs to be one we can afford. And I think that's because, it's fine. Me, I'm a middle class kind of guy. I can afford to eat, avocado and quinoa and
Haribo.
all this sort of stuff.
Haribo.
not that I eat that stuff.
Haribo, that's the thing.
We need to be respectful, I think, in terms of that. Not everybody has the choices we need to make, and I think we live in the National Health Service, and I think so. We know increasingly the costs of the health service is being spent actually on diseases caused by this condition we're talking about today. So is it 1 in 10 pounds gets spent on diabetes, but I think if your BMI is above 35, because of all the other conditions which are associated, it's twice the cost of someone whose BMI is within the normal range. And again, that's using a crude measure of BMI. I mean, some of these. So I think I always, on a personal level, I always encourage people to try different things, see if they find something that works. But if you look at the clinical studies, they're a bit disappointing. They most of them will work to some extent. So it's about, but you only get a small number of people who respond. So it is one of these things. It's people have to try, see what works. But it needs to be affordable. But there's a huge need that we go beyond telling people about diets. That's something maybe they, as you say, everybody's already chosen that multiple times by the time they've, it takes a lot of courage actually to go to the doctors and ask for help, I think, with something like this, particularly with all the issues which we talk about. And certainly I've known of, I think some of the cruelest are often some of the people I've worked with, and it can be devastating. It's even worse when because doctors never seem to know who their doctor is. So, I'm forever being called, I work with a chap called Dr. Hunt. I'm always being called Dr. Hunt. And it's like, oh, that Dr. Holmes, he's horrible. He said this, that, and the other. And I think, no, it's not me. So I think,
Dr. Hunt, you've outed him now.
But yeah, there's no magic diet out there. And if there is, please sell it to us. I think if we've got so many choices, that's because none of them are very good.
I mean, someone commented on Facebook, well, pulses and frozen vegetables are cheap, but has anyone actually eaten that? I mean, we're asking people to live on this for the rest of their life. It's just not doable, is it? And it's hot. They need to have some form of enjoyment and lifestyle and that kind of thing.
And the people I look after, Margate's a tough place to live. And, a lot of them are families living in houses of multiple occupancy. And a lot of them are, it is a food or fuel scenario. And they have families and they live on food banks. So, yes, of course, pulses are cheap. I can go and buy a thing of dried chickpeas for, I don't know, however much. I've got a packet downstairs, unopened, actually. And
out of date.
Yeah, probably. I mean, they're practically dead anyway, aren't they, chickpeas? But you have to have a kitchen, you have to have a fridge, you have to be able to afford to use it, you have to have knives to chop things, and you have to, if you're going to do this, batch cook stew, which always somebody says, you have to have nice bits of Tupperware to put them in the freezer, and you have to have a freezer, and you also, if you have children, you have to feed something that will fill their tummies. And anyone who's ever had a child knows that one day tomatoes are their favorite thing, and the next day you literally have tried to poison them, and you're the worst parent in the world if you feed them a tomato. And so some people, if you're on a limited budget and you don't have any choice, you are going to feed your child what you know will go in their tummy and fill them up. And so we have to, we absolutely, this is a hill I will die on. We have to remember that choice comes from a place of privilege, and that is not open to all of our patients. And sorry, I'll stop now, but it really matters.
It's really heartfelt. We can feel the passion behind those statements.
Yeah. And again, we've got families where there's addiction there. You know, addiction is something where people will, you know, it consumes that individual. They can't control it. And, you know, even cigarette addiction is an addiction where people will, you know, we don't all live in a wonderful, perfect world where it's middle class. And I think as I said, we've got a national health service. So if we believe in a national health service, 75 years birthday coming up, then, and certainly the politicians say they believe in it, and then we've got to make sure it's sustainable. And that's about being serious about managing, as I said, obesity, and it's not just about prevention, because prevention is a separate topic, really. But in terms of treating it, we've got lots of people there who are becoming ill, are needing, you know, I mean, it's one of these things, you know, even the simple thing, if you get them to lose weight, they're on less painkillers, opiates. You can reduce your opiate prescribing by getting them to lose weight. So, you know, it's linked to so many things. It is the condition really of the 21st century, really started in the back end of the 20th, but it's a condition which is defining the 21st.
Yeah. So what are people doing about this? I mean, I think the food industry probably has a lot to answer for in the additives and stuff that they put in foods, and the buy one get one frees on the really high calorie, high fat, high sugar foods. What kind of initiatives are out there to try and help with this epidemic? What do we call it?
Yeah, but we've got, I mean, we're getting some things now, which, as you said, there's more we can do. There's NICE have already come up and said what they think is cost effective. So we need to get that implemented. Some of these need drugs to be available, but there'll be better drugs coming down the line. You know, there'll be tablets which will be easy for people to take, and probably, you know, and we're not going to run out in the same way. Maybe they're a few years off some of these things, but there are better things coming. And we've got, you know, we do have access to NHS digital weight loss programs which are eligible certainly for people with hypertension, heart disease, type 2 diabetes. We do have some pilots in terms of remission. It is using that dust diet, most of it, I'm afraid, Steph. But there are food versions of that, and so there is some support that can help at least some people. But there's still a lot of winning of hearts of minds, you know, politically. I do think it'll come, but I think we are getting incrementally better. I don't know if Steph wants to talk about the treatments maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, I think we've kind of gone really deep into the conversation. We haven't done the basics. So we said, what's the treatment for obesity? What treatment do people get?
That's a massive question. All right. So
well, we've got 10 minutes. So
okay. So once somebody has established obesity, so this is not someone with 3 kilos to lose, this is established obesity, then if we're thinking about pharmacotherapeutics, so we're thinking about meds, right, then at the moment as a GP, the irony, all I can prescribe is Orlistat, which basically makes people poo themselves and isn't the best thing in the world, and the evidence isn't very good. So we don't tend to give it out very often. Some people might ask for it. That's what we can do. Then where all the research is now is in hormonal manipulation of your gut-brain axis, basically. So your GLP-1s, your glucagon, all the kind of things that signal hunger, signal fullness, satiety, and gastric emptying things. So we had liraglutide first, which everyone on this forum will be, very familiar with. And then we got semaglutide. And semaglutide was the big thing. So it was obviously started as a treatment for type 2 diabetes, and then obesity. It was clear that that was going to become useful. And semaglutide is useful. It's really good. We get to about a sort of 15 to 20% of body weight loss with semaglutide at a high dose. So as we know, there are problems at the moment, and the problems were entirely predictable. You have a drug that works to help people lose weight, and you have the majority of adults in lots of countries now living with overweight or obesity. Gosh, lots of people wanted the drug. What a surprise. So they couldn't make it fast enough, and they launched it in America first, and all the Wegovy in the whole world got sucked over to America, and they're not letting any of it go because they're using it all. And then off-license prescribing of Ozempic, for which obviously our patients with diabetes use, then got put into this equation because no one could get hold of Wegovy. And we have a little bit of an issue now. In terms of medication effectiveness, it's good. The supply issues are a whole thing that is a can of worms that I can't get into. Hopefully people will start making it, and the other ones will come out, and it'll all sort of settle down. But it should never have been a surprise to anyone that this was going to happen. The thing about the drugs is when you stop them, you get weight regain, because it is the same as a diet or a diet and exercise program. Our bodies, if you're living with obesity, are programmed to put all that weight back on because of the resetting of your metabolic set point, and it needs to go back up. So it's the same as having a diet and exercise, but except it stopped you being hungry, and it's really effective. And what we need to think is this is probably going to need to be a lifelong medication for a lifelong condition. This doesn't cure obesity. It's a lifelong medication for a lifelong condition. We're then going to have very soon tirzepatide, which is a combination medication. And then there was one called retagrutide or something.
Yeah, retagrutide.
Retagrutide. Oh, yeah, I got it right. Which they just released at a big convention, the studies on that. And you're getting to sort of 25% of body weight loss, which is the same as surgery. So if we go on to surgery, metabolic bariatric surgery is the most effective form of weight loss treatment. And it is the most effective form of treatment for type 2 diabetes. There are what I call temporary ones, which are just restrictive. So people will have a balloon. You can have a gastric balloon where you swallow a capsule, and then the surgeon, you're awake. It makes me gag thinking about it, but some people like it. You're awake, and then the surgeon inflates the balloon in your tummy. So it takes up space, and it's similar to what a gastric band used to be. And we don't really do either of those. Thing about those, they take up space, they help people lose the weight, but again, they're temporary. So take it out, remove the band, the weight goes back on again, generally because of the physiology and the disease of obesity. Then you have your other surgeries, which are the ones that really work, which are your sleeve gastrectomy. So you remove about 5/8 of the stomach. A Roux-en-Y bypass, where basically they rearrange your plumbing. So the food goes through faster into your gut from your very little teeny tummy. And then there's some others. There's a duodenal switch. There's other sort of more complicated surgeries. The mortality and morbidity of these are about the same now as having your gallbladder taken out laparoscopically. So they're safe, pretty much. They're a good surgery. And most people will lose weight. And you tend to lose weight over the first 18 months quite quickly. And you get to a nadir of weight loss at about 18 months. And then it is entirely normal to put some of that weight back on again. It's really annoying because you've gone out and bought all these amazing clothes and thrown away all your fat clothes. And then you go, oh, now I have to do it all again. Anyway, but you put on a little bit of weight again. But most people end up averaging between sort of 20 to 25% of their body weight loss. And that's over, most of the rest of their lives. There will be exceptions to that. The weight loss is, it's a lifelong commitment to eating differently. It is not easy. It is not the easy way out. I have to take daily vitamins. I have to eat every meal differently to how I ate before. But one of the things that I think is really important is, if you are someone who has obesity, you're probably someone who quite likes food, but you're also probably someone who has a relationship with food that is very love-hate. So you eat something you like and then you beat yourself up over it. What, for me, having surgery did was free me up to have a better relationship with food and to love food again. And I can only eat small amounts at a time. That doesn't matter. I can enjoy what I'm eating. And that freedom was mind-blowing when I had my op. So I went from being constantly hungry at all times because of my messed up hormonal brain access to going, oh, I'm not hungry. I don't understand. I might become one of those people who forgets to have lunch, possibly. I didn't become one of them, but it became something that I was no longer obsessed by food in a bad way, and I started to love food in a good way again. So that's really the treatment options. And bariatric surgery, metabolic bariatric surgery, changes your gut hormones. So that is why it works lifelong compared to everything else. And it changes your microbiome in your gut. It changes a lot of things. So those are the treatments. Not everyone should have surgery. Absolutely. I would never advocate that everyone should have surgery. But I know why people go abroad for surgery. It's expensive privately here. It's about 10 grand. If you go to Turkey, it's 3. I would caution people against going to a bad clinic abroad. There are good ones, but there are dangerous ones, like there are everywhere. But that's basically the summary of the treatments for obesity.
Yeah, I think we've seen that with the turkey teeth, haven't we? People go, so yeah, we don't want to have anything like that.
It just goes to show how it's such a desperate situation some people find themselves in, and the lengths they will go to lose weight, because
exactly.
It's horrible.
It is. And I think one thing that I really think is important, and then I'll let Patrick talk, I promise, is when we are setting the expectations of weight loss for our patients, if you are not having surgery or drugs, it is very unlikely that your patient is going to get and maintain, that's the key, and maintain more than about a 10 to 15% of their body weight loss over any length of time. Any diet study or weight loss study that's less than 5 years is probably not particularly accurate, because that's kind of when people have regained most of it. Because the chances of a woman who has class 3 obesity, so a BMI kind of over 45, of ever regaining a normal body weight, a normal BMI, is 1 in 677, and for men it's 1 in 1290. Wow. And that's just getting there, let alone maintaining it. So we need to set realistic expectations for our patients and not set them up to fail by telling them they need to get to a normal BMI. And now I'll shut up.
That sounded like a very good take-home message, being that we've got 1 minute to go. So Patrick, do you want to have your take-home message?
In a minute, it's not going to happen.
1 minute flat.
No. I think first of all, I would absolutely what Steph says in terms of this weight gain. Even with thinking about diabetes, most people are going to put that weight back on. So we've got to be realistic. We've got to accept that will happen. Prepare them for that. Don't be judgmental. If they put the weight on, please don't. And then I suppose my hope, actually, there's a pill you'll hear about, again, just as retagrutide is one of these expensive peptides I won't be able to produce enough, but there's one called All4 Glipron, or a bit like All 4, the TV program, Glip, and then Ron, Weasley. Anyway,
sounds like something from Game of Thrones, I thought.
Anyway, All4 Glipron, but that's a small molecule. So that it's only early data at the moment, phase 2, it's going into phase 3. So it's probably about 3, 4, 5 years off being available, but it's a small molecule. So a bit like, gliclazide or dapagliflozin or whatever, it can be produced at mass. And that's about a 50, it's a bit like a Wegovy weight loss of about 15%. So there is hope out there that we can actually offer more sustainable treatments, but we're meant to be a wealthy country. We should be able to afford some of this for people right now. But I do take Steph's point. you know, we've got to start small with these pilots, get them out there, try to get some traction, see what works, and then we're ready for these other things which come. But there's good reasons to be hopeful.
Brilliant. So on that note, we are out of time. So thank you to everybody that was watching. We probably have a break for summer for the brunches, and we'll probably come back and do one in the sort of early autumn. So thank you for watching. If you miss any of it, it will be available on Facebook all day. Well, it'll be up forever. It will. We've recorded it, so we'll put it on our YouTube channel. We will also make this into a podcast in about 10 minutes because I'm very good at that. And yeah, and I just want to say big thank you to our special guest, Steph and Patrick. Thank you so much for coming. It's been so insightful. I think we're going to get a lot of traction on this. I think a lot of people are going to want to really listen to this one because it's very, you know, it impacts not just people with diabetes, but a lot of people generally. So brilliant talk. Thank you so much for coming. And I'll just say goodbye to everybody on Facebook. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.